Welcome, everybody. Today is Tuesday, February 1st, 2022. This is the Hannah City Village Council meeting. First item on the agenda, if you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. So our guests we have tonight are, I think, everybody. We have Johnny, we have Kent, who is the mayor of Farmington, and we have Sharon Williams, who are a council representative. Thank you guys for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Fred went off, sorry. So Fred, I'll go ahead and Brian.
Yeah, that's okay. Before we let Johnny throw in here, I'll kind of give you an update of where we are in the trail. Fred, you can, and Johnny, if I miss anything, let me know. But basically, where we're at in the process is our work with IDNR is pretty well, in terms of actually having access to the grant money, is pretty well in place. We have the grant agreement is signed and they've approved the appraisal. So those are the two big steps that I think made the money available to us. Now to get the money, we actually, because it's a reimbursement, it's not up front and then you go use it to spend it. Because it's a reimbursement, then we have to get a purchase agreement in place with the railroad, Union Pacific Railroad. Johnny, who is on here tonight, is the attorney that we've hired to help us with the due diligence process and the drafting of, or the negotiation, probably a better way to say it, with looking at the drafting of the agreement that UP is put in place. We invited Johnny here tonight, Fred here tonight, Kent here tonight, and Sharon here tonight because they represent all the entities who are working with us on getting the property purchased. We wanted to give an update of kind of where we're at and the obstacles that are currently in our place so that we can have a good discussion here as the board and you can give us some advice and direction as to what you are and are not comfortable with as we start to look at how to move forward. Did I miss anything? Or?
Nope, that's basically it. The only thing that I'll say just as background for some of the newer board members is this project has been ongoing for almost 20 years. In 2008 is when we really first got involved and started moving forward with this project. And that's why I have stayed involved with it, because I've been with the project since the beginning. But now it's getting down to crunch time. We have basically until March 30th of this year to get an agreement signed with the Union Pacific to satisfy the Surface Transportation Board for the purchase of the rail corridor. It does not look like we're going to make that with all of the restrictions in the agreement, the time frame in the agreement and that. So one of our things that we'll be discussing tonight is asking the Surface Transportation Board for another extension. They have told us that they will not give us another extension. The last one we got a year ago was going to be the last extension they would give us. So where that leaves us, we don't know.
We do have a draft agreement from UP, and Johnny's going to speak to that. But as we got into it and started looking at it, I think it became clear for all of the parties involved that the due diligence period was probably going to last us longer than the end of March in order to get that in place. Now, Johnny and others have done some good work to maybe give us some options that would allow us to move forward and minimize our risk if we don't get an extension. We can talk about that as well. But I'm going to shut up, Johnny, and I'm going to let you kind of go through what you've got on your agenda, and I'll throw in, and Fred can throw in, and they can ask questions as we go.
That sounds good. Can you all hear me all right? Okay. First, thank you for accommodating me appearing by Zoom. So much for all the dire reports that there'd be snow on the ground already. I don't see anything really happening outside the window, but enough to get everyone riled up. So,
Oh, there
so
it
here
is.
we are. So just to start sort of at the beginning, in terms of, I have maybe 5 or 6 points that I just wanted to brief you on and then answer questions and so on. Brian Baylor and Fred Winteroth are definitely up to speed on this. We've been working closely with them and keeping the mayor also in the loop on occasion. So just to sort of start toward the beginning, as Brian mentioned, the grant has been largely approved. There is still a ministerial sort of approval of an appraisal that needs to happen, but I understand that that's not going to be a major hangup.
We actually got news, Jonica, we actually got news that that's done.
Oh, terrific. Okay. So now what is left is to actually make a demand for the money. The way this appears to work is that the Village of Hannah City will have to actually come out of pocket in the first instance, pay the amounts for the purchase, and then be reimbursed. So one of the things we're looking at is how that process would work. Presumably there would need to be a loan of some kind. And it appears that it'd be 2 to 3 months before the reimbursement would come back. So there is the potential for incurring interest and so on. That's something that would need to be addressed, obviously, before any outlay of funds.
So Jonica, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're not going to vote on that tonight, but that's one of the things we would like to understand the board's comfort level on, is we're looking at a loan that we would have to take for probably a 3-month time frame in order to purchase the property. Obviously, there's going to be some interest associated with that, and there's some risk associated with that. So that's something that we're going to want you guys to weigh in and let us know if that's a showstopper or not a showstopper. Do we want to talk about these as we go, Jonica? Is that?
I think that might be the easiest way to do this. And obviously, as Brian said, there's nothing scheduled to vote on today. This is really discussion, Q&A, to the extent we can, and just to sort of take the board's temperature generally about the best path forward. So I think it probably does make sense to chat about these items as they come up. If you'd rather reserve comments to the end, I can just keep going.
Now let's take them one at a time. Fred, why don't you speak to the loan? You've been doing some work on that.
Right. As far as the loan, basically the grant is going to cover a little bit over $1.5 million of the purchase price of this property. And so that's basically what we would have to be looking at to get a loan. They said anywhere from 6 to 8 week reimbursement from the state. Whenever the state tells me 6 to 8 weeks, you can pretty well double that because they've never been on time to begin with. Our grant was supposed to have been approved within 12 months and it took almost 24 months. So pretty well double anything they tell you. So that's what we would be looking at is getting a bridge loan of some sort. I talked with the Bank of Farmington. They're very supportive of this project, and they said that they would work with us on something, but I haven't gotten down to what that would be yet.
So no terms, I guess, but at this point, the question, I guess, for us is philosophically, is that something you were comfortable with or not comfortable with? There's going to be cost and risk, associated with the cost. I don't know. I don't think it would be terribly significant. Maybe somebody else knows banking better than I do. I know Kent was running some numbers earlier today, so he might know.
If you borrow $1.5 million for, say, 3 months, the total cost might be $10,000, depending upon the rate. So it's significant, but yet I would think it would be doable if you divide it, if you apportion it somehow.
So, and then the other thing would be is if for some reason something were to fall apart in that time frame, and I don't think that's likely, but even if it's unlikely and something should happen, then we're on the hook for that amount of money. Or I guess we could cancel the.
We could cancel the loan. We wouldn't have to keep the loan.
We just pay the loan back
with itself.
immediately.
Yeah.
So general thoughts on that, guys and gals?
I look at the purchase price. Isn't it and tell me if I'm wrong, I'm looking at the documents that Janicki, sorry. She sent out today, 1.9,
1.967.
okay.
232, it would be basically what we've agreed as the price of the corridor. Of that 1.967, 232, the grant would take care of 80% of it, and then the other communities, Peoria County, Farmington, and Hannah City would pick up the other 393,446.
So we'd only have to borrow the 80% of that.
So we only borrow the 80%.
Which I think is I thought it was like 1.6 and some change, but it's not right.
1.57378584.
You don't have any more detail, Fred?
Any change?
That's it.
Okay, well, we can have more discussion about this too as we go, if you want to let it marinate a little bit. So turning to the UP purchase agreement, which we received a little over a week ago, it was pretty onerous. It's clearly the railroad's bid to sort of drop off this land and get out of Dodge. Among other provisions, and some of the items they seem willing to work with us on to make a little clearer, a little more straightforward. But there is one major provision in the contract that is giving us heartburn, and there is a related recommendation with this. So I will start with this point, which is they're asking for a blanket indemnity for anything that will ever happen on the line. So obviously anything that would happen after Hannah City takes ownership would be Hannah City's problem anyway. The concern here is that they're looking backwards. So if there was, let's say, and this is the big one, if there was environmental contamination on the line under UP's purview and something comes up later, the village of Hannah City is actually indemnifying UP against that. This is a concern, clearly, and this is apparently not negotiable on the part of UP. Our sort of general feeling about this is that, UP has represented to us that they're not aware of any issues on the line. And we're going to put that in the contract to say specifically that they've made that representation and we're relying on it. But along with that, we would strongly recommend that before agreeing to or before closing on a contract that would include this provision, that a environmental report be obtained. I've spoken with some folks at Farnsworth, and I know Mr. Lott is, I believe, there in the room with you. And hello, and they're putting together an estimate, a cost and time estimate to complete what we're calling a modified phase 1 report. And as I understand it, that would consist of a database search to see if there's anything reported along the line that would be a cause for concern. And then also having someone, presumably after the snow clears a little bit, just take an ATV or whatnot down the line and visually observe and see if there's anything that looks untoward along the line. And Farnsworth would then generate a report that we could rely on to an extent in pursuing or continuing on with the environmental indemnification. So taking a little bit of a step back, the contract as proposed by UP is set up to be signed first, and then there's a period of due diligence, which they propose 30 days. And I think the reason they propose 30 days to complete all of this is really just because of the STB, the Surface Transportation Board deadline of March 30th. So they're not wedded to that date if we could get an extension from the STB. So we'd sign first, then there'd be a period of time to do due diligence. And then after that, really either party pretty much has an out for a period of time, about 10 days or so. There's an opportunity to terminate the contract if, for example, we're not happy with the results of the due diligence and so on. one of the other provisions that we're going to put into the contract in the draft that we circulated today, just amongst our team, is a condition of closing that we have negotiated and completed an intergovernmental agreement with Village of Farmington and Peoria County that is acceptable to all three of the governmental entities. So in the event that we aren't able to negotiate that agreement, that would be a basis to just terminate the contract with UP. So what we're looking at, what we're considering now, and what we're going to make recommendations about to you probably for your next meeting is if we can negotiate the UP contract into a position where we can recommend, at least provisionally, that the village signs the agreement, hopefully with additional time for due diligence beyond that 30 days. We're suggesting 90 at a minimum. That we could go ahead and sign the contract and then simultaneously be pursuing these other efforts, the environmental, the intergovernmental agreement, and so on, because Hannah City won't actually be bound to close unless all of those conditions are met. So that is sort of where we are right now. We're planning.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, no, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to bring up 3 points. One is that gets us around, to some degree, waiting to sign the agreement. However, it creates, in my view, new issues that we're spending money with the risk that that money never goes towards anything if we decide to back out later. And so we need to have some discussion about that, where that funding does and can come from. Can it come from the grant or not for the environmental study and so forth? Just to clarify, we did receive in our meeting, Fred and I had a meeting this morning with Peoria County and Farmington. At that meeting, we did learn that there is already a environmental issue on the trail right near Tribola, and they've sent me information. I can forward that to you, Brandon. So it's confusing to me because they said they have contacted UP regarding that issue and have not gotten a response, but yet UP is saying that they don't know of any existing issues. And again, I don't know how serious that is or isn't. I'm just saying that there is an identified issue. And I'm assuming, again, Janaki, that there may be others out there that they've been banging on somebody's door and not heard anything, and now all of a sudden there's a new door to bang on.
Yes, and I can pretty much guarantee you that that is the case. I mean, so what UP has told us is that there's not any known, what we call an area of environmental concern, which is a spill, known contamination, that sort of thing. They are not saying that they're not aware of any sort of issues, construction issues and so on. The issue at Trivola, as I understand it, is really a maintenance issue coupled with a stormwater runoff issue where there's stormwater going off the UP embankment onto a roadway and freezing. So obviously not a good thing. It's a cause of concern. And I promise you that things will continue to arise as soon as UP isn't the owner of that line. I mean, we've all heard Bellevue's complaints about people riding ATVs along the line. We will be absolutely getting calls about that as soon as the closing occurs and so on. So yes, if we were to proceed, there's sort of a few areas of cost, as Brian sort of started to allude to. So we have first the cost that you're incurring now. My cost, Mr. Lott, and Farnsworth, and those sorts of costs, those transactional costs to get to closing. Then you're going to have, absolutely going to have maintenance and securing of the costs incurred in securing the line. For example, in Bellevue, the folks were riding their ATVs. While you aren't necessarily going to go out there and pave it and make it pretty for them, you are at least going to want to stop people from accessing that line. So now you're putting up barricades. That's cost. And once you put up those barricades, you're going to want to monitor them to make sure nobody's taking them down. And see, these sorts of things are absolutely going to come up. remember, you're going to be liable if something happens along that line. So, for example, I saw Fred had shown me a picture of one of the trestle bridges there on the line, and it's full of holes. I mean, it's probably okay from a structural standpoint, though we don't know that for a fact. But at the very least, somebody would have to go out there and put planks across and so on to make sure nobody falls in a hole. These are all costs that you will incur. And these are not really discretionary costs.
Go ahead.
Okay, these aren't really discretionary costs. These are sort of the basic maintenance, upkeep costs, coupled with the potential for indemnification costs that could be incurred relative to UP. So where that sort of leads into is the question of whether Hannah City, because Hannah City will be the title owner of this line. And that's, my understanding is that that's required by the grant, because Hannah City was the grant applicant. Hannah City is on the hook for being the sole owner. Obviously, we're working on this intergovernmental agreement pursuant to which the county and Village of Farmington are going to share in the responsibility going forward. But again, that's something we would need a commitment from Farmington and from the county before we'd want to take on ownership of the line, unless Hannah City's willing to bear the entire cost of the and so on that I just mentioned.
So we had I'm sorry, I just want to give an update. We had a meeting today with Farmington and Peoria County, and we asked those questions. One, are you willing to share in the liability exposure after the line is purchased? And the second question was, are you willing to share in the basic maintenance cost of the trail once the purchase takes place on an ongoing basis? Obviously, they don't have answers to that today. We were just talking to one representative, back to our issue on time. They got to go back to their boards and ask those questions and have discussions about it and so forth. So for us, the Village of Hannah City, we will have a decision point. If they're in, that's one, because then we're sharing in the liability and the cost. If they're not in, then are we willing to burden all that ourselves in order for the trail to go through?
So
Because at
I'm
this
not
point,
sure.
the intergovernmental agreement only covers the initial purchase of the property in terms of funding.
That's correct. Yes. So that's something we could discuss now, or I can give you a little bit more of a framework of
Keep going.
sort of the immediate cost.
Keep going.
Okay. All right. So as Fred mentioned, the STB current deadline is March 30th. That deadline is actually not just to reach a contract with the UP. It's actually to, we don't need to close on the transaction, but it needs to be irrevocable. It needs to just be a ministerial act, as they put it, to bring it to closing. So that means all the due diligence is done. There are no more conditions of closing and so on. So we have more than just signing, negotiating and signing the contract that needs to be done to meet that deadline. And as Fred said, that does not seem to be terribly realistic. That being said, a full court press of, having Farnsworth start its report, is on Thursday or what have you, and all that, it's conceivable, but it's unlikely that we'd be able to get it done in time, especially given the multiple approvals that need to be obtained from multiple governmental entities. So something we've been discussing with, we have a consultant on line 2 who's a expert on STB procedures and so on. And we've discussed with UP is the possibility of asking for an additional extension of, we're thinking 90 to 180 days to complete the due diligence and whatnot under the contract. The thoughts are that the bases for asking for this extension, even though they've already told us no more extensions, we have a few. The first basis is this is Hannah City that would be doing this now, not the state agency, the DNR, not even the county of Peoria, but Hannah City, population 1,200, is going to be the lead agency, and we need a little more time, and hopefully they would understand that. The second feather in our cap that we might be able to do, again, depending on how we want to stack the actions here, we might be able to have a signed agreement with UP. We won't be done with due diligence, but if we say we're under contract, we're negotiated, We just need to complete due diligence. That would be definitely a positive. And UP has already committed to supporting the request. The third item, and this is a bit odd, is that back in 2013, the property owners who might have reversionary interests along the rail line, they actually have already been paid for their interests by the federal government. So that is a positive too. We're not holding up anybody's rights. They're already vindicating those actions. So hopefully, but amongst those different points, we would be able to prevail upon the STB to give us the extension with UP's support.
And just let me interrupt you, Janet, in just a second here. What she's talking about as far as reversionary rights, we knew this going in, was that when the railroad was first built, there were some property owners who did not sell their property to the railroad. Of the 218 acres that we're talking about, there was about 10% that of the property owners who have what they call reversionary rights, where they allowed an easement for the railroad, but they maintained ownership of that property. There is an organization that whenever a railroad gets abandoned, they go to all these property owners and they say, hey, we can get you this property back. And they file a class action lawsuit against the federal government to get their property back. Of that 20 acres, or that 10% of this 218 acres, it's my understanding, in following up on a class action lawsuit that we became aware of, that those property owners have already received compensation for that. So that could help us in asking for an extension, because the only people that have opposed us on all of our extensions has been this group that represents people with reversionary rights. So that could help us in getting another extension.
Yeah, I think that's a fair summary. And the STB expert we've engaged, he does think that we have a better than usual chance of getting an extension from the STB under these circumstances. One additional note that I wanted to mention is, talking to the UP folks, their intention, if we do not close, if we do not complete this purchase, is not to abandon the line, but rather to vacate the abandonment and try to sell the line to somebody else. Though who else would buy it, I can't quite imagine. And that would be a direct sale, I believe, rather than using the rail banking abandonment provisions of the rails to trails. So that's just a point of interest. So the UP is not necessarily looking at this the way I started looking at it, which is this is their one chance to get some money for this line. They instead are thinking somehow that they're going to sell the line to some other third party if we're out of the picture. So they are being very supportive still, but they're not being as flexible on things like the environmental indemnification as you might want them to be, as we might all want them to be. So at this point, the question, and this is not something again to vote on, but more a question for the trustees to consider, is whether we should be pursuing things like the environmental report and so on in tandem with the extension request, whether we prefer to focus on just the extension request first, because if we can't get the extension, we might just be unable to get this across the finish line anyway. If the trustees have any thoughts about signing the contract without necessarily having the intergovernmental agreement completely worked out, I'd be just interested to hear thoughts, understanding, of course, that this is not a commitment on the part of Hannah City at this point.
And before we have our trustees weigh in, Sharon and Kent, do you have any questions or do you have anything you'd like to weigh in on before we start our discussion?
Well,
Go ahead.
I would like to offer, reiterate again, that I would like to see this liability language so that we could run it by our attorney, Janicki. And I would like to have our attorney be able to call you if I could for the background information, if that's okay.
Absolutely. What I can do is excise just the portions of the contract that really are dealing with that.
Okay.
And I can, if Fred has your information, which I'm guessing he does, I can forward that to him. And Fred, if you want to just send me Kent's info, I can get him the excerpt and my contact information to speak with Farmington's attorney.
Very good. And the second thing is, I think my first opinion is that I would attempt to get the extension before you spend any money, before anybody spends any money, you individually or us collectively, on the environmental study. Simply because, I think that would be the right path to follow, logical path to follow. So I guess that would be my thought. And that's all I have to say, other than it's pretty overwhelming. Yeah.
There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of different sorts of law going on, and that does complicate things a bit. But I think that Kent's observation about pursuing the extension in the first instance is a good one. And frankly, if we could get a signature on the agreement, if we can get UP to be reasonable on at least most of the terms, that would support the extension and doesn't really involve a great expenditure as due diligence would. So that might be a way to a path forward that would be less expensive, but still move the ball forward and maybe support the extension request.
It would also give us some opportunity for Peoria County and Farmington to meet with their folks and see what the intergovernmental agreement looks like. And there's no cost to having those conversations. And so that would give this board more data if we had the extension and we knew where that landed.
What is the timeline for asking for an extension? What kind of term?
Yeah, if we were to proceed with the request, I would suggest that we make the request within the next week or two, as soon as possible.
How long does it usually take for them to respond?
My understanding is that they're supposed to respond in a matter of weeks, but it's been more like a couple months.
Yeah, I think the last extension, they were very, very prompt, and I think it took us less than a month to get a response from them.
That's about the time we've got.
But that's about the time we've got, right?
Yes, exactly. So the thought, at least between me and the specialist attorney and the UP contact, was that if we're going to ask for an extension, it probably goes in no later than next week. Now, that might mean that we're ahead of the signature on any contract, because obviously we won't have met and considered the revised contract, but at least we can start the process with the STB.
Sharon, do you have any thoughts or comments that you'd like to bring forward?
So, just in speaking with a couple of folks today, the big concern is the absolving of all liability by the, just some of the that Amy made today are very with the environmental issues. She said there's some diesel fuel leaking up somewhere. There's a couple of other things that she's very concerned about. And then with the five structures and what state they're in. So there's a lot of concerns there about the price tag on what this is really going to look like.
Absolutely. And Ms. Williams, if you'd like me to send along the indemnification language that UP has in its contract, I'd be happy to share that with the county also to get that process started.
Yes, I would appreciate it.
And Fred, if you have Ms. Williams' email too, I'd appreciate it.
Right. they also have a copy of the original purchase and sale agreement from the UP. So that language is in there under section 11, I believe, is what that, yes, section 11 on that contract that I sent you guys by email. So, and we'll show you what our attorneys have come up with in reference to that also.
Yeah, the only substantive change to section 11 since the original version, because they've told us they aren't gonna make any changes, is we've added a section at the end where they are representing to us that on reasonable inquiry, they are not aware of any conditions or issues. We'll see if they leave that in light of what I'm hearing about diesel fuel. That's not a great thing to hear about, but.
I do
All
want
right.
to add that they have addressed many of the issues that have come forward to them in the past couple of years. Concerns from Bellevue about the ATVs. They've offered to put up barriers. They've offered to police the area, but they have done none of that.
Well, and Ms. Williams, that is everyone's experience with railroads, so that's why too, I would anticipate that we were gonna find, once Hannah City and the group takes control of that line, things will come up. There are going to be property owners who've been trying to get UP's attention and haven't been able to over the years. So I'd be amazed if we didn't have a little queue form of people who've had complaints that we've never heard about.
I would
All right. There's your update. I mean, you guys are pretty well up to date with where we are at this point. It sounded pretty good when we heard that the grant was going to come through. And then as we start digging into it, all these other little issues start popping up. So that being said, I would just like to encourage the board to really consider whether or not you want to move forward. I think with the way the contract is written right now with the UP, with what they sent us, I don't think I would be in favor of signing it. With the changes that our attorneys have made to the contract, I've read the red line copy that you sent us. If the UP agrees to that, I feel a whole lot better with what you've put in there to kind of protect our interest. There's always going to be that possibility that something's going to be out there. You look at all of the other communities that have done these, they've had the same issues. From my understanding, that's a standard indemnification all the railroads ask for whenever they abandon one and get rid of it. So the Rock
But they
Island
wouldn't be
Trail,
abandoning it in this case, though. They'd just be rail banking it.
it'd be rail banking.
Yeah.
But it's an abandonment type
Yeah.
They're
issue.
abandoning liability.
I think the difference here on this one is that they know they're going to get money eventually for it. If they've already said that they're going to vacate the line and sell it, if this doesn't go through, then you're kind of acing the hole of, hey, this is the only way you're going to get any money for this, or otherwise you're just going to be sitting on unused right away. Kind of goes away a little bit because it will get bought. I mean, I've seen it before. If somebody will come forward or a group will come forward and buy it and then divvy it up after the fact. So I think that's why they're thinking, I don't know how much they'll bend because they know given enough time, somebody will come forward and buy the whole thing or buy portions of it or divide it into thirds and groups will come forward and buy it. And, it worries me a little bit that they just will say, sorry, we're not bending on anything.
I will say that other than the environmental indemnification, they do seem to be somewhat flexible, and they're flexible on time too, as long as we can get that STB extension. And that they are willing to support that is a good sign. I mean, we're sitting here, we've got the money. they'd rather just sell it to us because it's easy. But I think you're right that if we put up, we don't necessarily have the strongest hand to bully them into agreeing to our terms. In terms of what Fred said about, not being comfortable signing it, but being comfortable with the changes potentially, I agree to an extent, but I do want to just keep in mind that until, let's say we sign, until that due diligence is completed, we don't really know what we're buying. And so having Farnsworth do the environmental review, doing a property condition sort of review, as Ms. Williams suggested, just doing at least a cursory inspection of the bridges and so on. But until that's done, we don't know how much risk you're taking on by agreeing to the indemnification. So I do think there's a lot of known unknowns right now that we'll need to track down before I'd be comfortable saying, let's go to closing. So the next step, I think, is to respond to UP with the contract, with the proposed changes, say, let's at least see if we can get a negotiated contract that still has the ripcords for avoiding closing if we aren't comfortable with where we are after the due diligence and in respect to the other governmental entities.
Yeah, because I think the extension is probably something that we do need to file either way, because if we don't file for an extension and it does take more than this, then, and we end up having Farnsworth do it, then we're just throwing money down the drain.
Yeah, it will. Yeah, it's not going to do this in 60 days.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
my opinion would be that, yes, we do try to file for an extension with transportation,
All right.
surface transportation, as soon as possible, so that we can move forward to find out what our cause and effect are. I know, Jonathan, you were still looking with the UP and working with them, which is fine. I mean, if we don't get this within our period or they deny us, then at that point, if we don't get an extension, then unfortunately this project to us is done because they won't get us any more extensions.
It isn't like Farnsworth starting tomorrow anyway.
Right.
Minimum, it's going to be several weeks. You can't see the ground. I mean,
Yeah.
You can search the database from your office, but the part that's really going to matter, because there's going to be this crossing at Trevoli is only going to be the first one. There's going to be people everybody's going to see it as an easy target now to get drainage issues fixed and runoff issues fixed that the railroads historically ignore with everybody. Bridges and stuff. It'll be a death by 1,000 cuts maintenance wise is what'll happen afterwards if we don't kind of look at that and make sure there's no big problems like that with any landowners just waiting for somebody to be more responsive and local.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Fair
Yes.
point.
Out of ignorance, what happens if we ignore those things just like UP did?
We're not UP.
Unfortunately, we know where you are.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not like somebody from Hannah City's going to drive to DC. So
Yeah, unfortunately, they know where City Hall is, so you're probably going to hear about it sooner.
The railroads kind of exist out there somewhere in the nether. They're there and they're not there. The average person, even I'm sure Brandon's come across, even you guys trying to get a hold of them sometimes, you don't matter. Farnsworth doesn't matter to them.
I was just kind of shocked at the speed you were moving to
Yeah.
begin with the railroad. So no, you're right. I have a couple of questions, if I might.
You go ahead.
I'm kind of new to this, and they've been working with some of the other folks who are experts in my firm. I used to do a lot of this. I don't do as much of it anymore, so I know more than enough to be dangerous. But a lot of times when we do an environmental site assessment, we're providing cover. And I'm not an attorney. I try to remember all this. A joint and several liability to say that, hey, I looked, and if in the future we find out that this property was contaminated, I didn't do it because it wasn't contaminated. I looked to provide essentially assurance when I purchased that so that I'm not liable moving forward. Is that correct enough?
In the state of nature, it would be.
Right.
So that would be it's what's typically called an innocent purchaser defense. So
right.
we did our homework, we weren't
Right.
negligent, we covered our bases, we looked, and there was nothing there. And golly, why should we be on the hook for it? We just walked into this, it wasn't our fault.
Right.
However, because of that indemnification with UP, we are essentially taking on contractually a liability for things that happened before.
Right.
So that's the scary thing. That's the big difference between this and the sort of normal course of buying a piece of real estate.
Okay. And so that I think is how hard do you look for something that's been there 140 years? There's a reasonable level of inquiry to look for what we call recognized environmental conditions that is usually good enough. Here, how hard do you look? You put a hole in the ground every 50 feet for 24 and a half miles? No, I don't think so. But that's the sort of question. And then I guess my question would be, what happens if you find something? Are you out? What happens? Because not that hopefully there isn't anything there. Of course, the railroad said that there wouldn't be, but
we've heard about two things already on this call. So
right. And so I guess the question would be: is if there is a reasonable expectation, we find something that we might want to look into further. What does that do? It's another question mark moving forward in a timeline. Not to be negative, but I just wonder what those. And then the final thing.
Can we talk about that for a second?
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, please.
So as we've talked about this, I've asked similar questions, and I've asked people involved, if we've talked about it endlessly, handicap the risk for me. And basically what I hear is when it comes to environmental stuff, there's probably not going to be 100 things. There might only be 1, 2, or 3.
Okay.
But the risk is those small number of things could be major in terms of cost. And so to me, the answer to your question would be is if we do some sort of cursory study, and we find something and you say, there could be some significant cost there, then I think that's informative to this group in order to make a decision as to whether or not we want to take that risk on or not.
Cross that bridge when you get there.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think all of us would love to see this happen and love to see the trail go through, but we also have a responsibility to the village of Hannah City, and we don't have a huge budget, and we couldn't afford a significant.
And another thing about the environmental aspect of it is there has not been a train across that track for 30 years. So if there was leakage or something of that nature, a lot of that has already been absorbed. The main thing is if there was a major dump of some sort where a whole train car got knocked over in an area and now you've got a huge area that is contaminated. The general leakage along a railroad after 30 years of not even having a train across there, that leakage may have been 100 years ago. You're not going to have a major problem. What we have to try to figure out is there a major spill or a major area that has been contaminated that would cause us concern?
I think you can narrow down those spots pretty easily. I mean, I'm sure you have an idea. I'm sure Ken has an idea of places based on the history of that line and what was along it. I have a couple ideas about where you would look immediately for any spills of fuel, where transfers happen and stuff. I mean, it's
Probably like the railhead where it meets down in Peoria.
I'd be more worried about change oil in Farmington there. I think they used to transfer oil off of there.
Okay.
You know,
Those are the sorts of on the ground information that will really help if we get to that point.
Yeah.
It will help Farnsworth prepare the report and to prepare a report that is substantive, that we can actually have some faith in to help with the risk analysis. Because that's really what this is for. I mean, you asked what it's for. It's for risk analysis at this point. It's really to do, as Brian said, to give everybody an understanding of sort of what we're getting into. It's our best chance or our best opportunity to do that.
if you do final environmental, if we get to the point that we did have an environmental study done, if we could get the extension and you do find a spot, would the railroad accept responsibility if you did point out environmental issues? Said, hey,
I don't-
we'll take
yeah, I
it.
don't
You guys are going to be responsible for this. You know,
I don't know, but that would be something we would bring up. If we found a specific item where we could point to it and say, this is a known existing issue, and you should be the one to bear the cost of it. If it's something particular like that, I think they'd be more likely to talk about it. They want after the closing, they want to be done.
Yeah.
So
Back to Brandon's question. I'm sorry. Back to Brandon's question, though. If we found it and they said no, are you out?
yeah, it's our problem. If we close, no.
I'm asking the board. If we found something and they said, tough luck, you still have to sign over the indemnification.
well, yeah, we're not going to take their cleanup.
Yeah.
But then you actually do kind of have some leverage against them because
But
who else are they going to sell it to if somebody local knows that's in an open meeting that has pointed out environmental issues
Actually,
along
there's a
there? Then that,
non-disclosure
you
in that. There's a non-disclosure. If we do find anything that we have to turn over all of our reports to the Surface Transportation and have to sign a disclosure on it. Because I read that in the notes today.
So I didn't mean to get you off your third point. I just wanted to ask those questions.
No, that was actually a pretty good segue, talking about contamination, where if we were to find contamination that is migrating and impacting an adjacent landowner, either today, and I think it is important to recognize that you're not digging this up and putting in a linear kindergarten here. You're going to put a path on it, and it's going to remain the way it is today. It's a lot of times we get that question. Okay, we found a little bit of something. Now what?
Yeah. A lot of times, don't disturb it. I mean,
Just leave it alone.
if you're not going to penetrate the ground, then don't penetrate the ground.
But an environmental condition that might have a program or have an impact to an adjacent landowner, would have a method to seek, and again, I'm getting out over my skis here, that you would be liable for, to me is a little bit different than what you talked about, the property condition review. Bridges that are old and falling, maybe not as safe as could be, drainage issues. EPA doesn't care about that. If you've got a drainage issue where somebody's got bad drainage because of you, that's not necessarily an environmental condition where the EPA or some program exists to go clean up. That maybe is a different type of liability. And is that something that we're looking for too? And that's kind of my, the bridge conditions is different than a leaking tank.
Yeah.
You might be able to go out there right now and say, this bridge is falling down. UP, you take, what are you going to do about that? They may very well say, go pound sand.
For me, the way I thought about that, it may not be the right way, but if you're out there already and you're going down the trail, you just make note of how you need to be prepared. That it would give us some sort of order of magnitude in terms of what that first maintenance cost might look like. Mm-hmm. Is it $10,000 or is it $50,000?
Yeah.
So to me, that's the value of that.
But you mentioned an environmental issue in Trivoli, which sounds to me like it's not necessarily environmental.
Yeah, maybe I misinterpreted that.
But it does that give you liability? Do you have liability then now that landowner can come to you?
Yep.
Yes.
Because it doesn't drain the way he wants it to.
We have financial liability. We got to fix it.
Do you?
Sure.
What did UP do, or what would you take responsibility for?
That was the question I just asked. Are we responsible for it? And everybody laughed and said, well, they know where you live, so they're going to come looking for you until you fix it.
But the EPA would be somebody they could go to if it was environmental. If it was just drainage that they didn't like, I guess you see the subtle difference there.
Sure.
I don't look for drainage issues when I'm doing a phase 1 ASTM standard environmental site assessment. We talk about it, but just because somebody doesn't like the way the ground drains, sorry. What did you do, or what are you acquiring as far as liability with respect to things that aren't purely environmental?
Yeah, I think I'm sorry.
I think those would just be, we still have our environmental study, but we still also have those pure reference notes that, hey, this is something that, we're going to be coming back to if we do purchase this. Hey, these property owners are going to come back to us because, UP hasn't been doing anything in the last 30 years about it. Now, now that they know Hannah City owns it, they're going to probably be coming knocking on our door. So it's something we need to make
But
reference.
legally, do we have the legal responsibility to fix something that they've lived with for the last 30 years.
If we,
Well, and
if we sign the indemnity, we do, because they don't have anybody to hold responsible. They've had the UP, but the UP's never.
Or I suppose we could say we're not going to do anything about it, but then now you've got a PR issue, or Hannah City's a horse's backside because they won't take it on. Or we've got the UTVs are still running through Bellevue. Hannah City now owns that property. What are you going to do about it? And again,
you'll have all the liability of an owner. I mean, you're an owner. So just as, let's say you own a piece of property as an individual and there's a drainage issue and the drainage, your water's draining into your neighbor's yard, neighbor's going to sue you. So that's part of what we'd be getting into buying it, even without regard to the indemnification per se. That sort of existing condition issue, that's more in the sort of maintenance, security vein that we know is going to be a liability post-closing.
That's what I mean. Is it, to me, it's a little bit different than environmental.
Oh yeah, it's 100% different. But
Just
if the water flows there, the water flows there. It's good. The water goes where the water goes. But if you haven't been doing ditch maintenance, if you got a plug culvert, if you have a culvert that gives way and washes out, and you're not maintaining your property, then you have some liability to fix that, especially if it's damaging somebody else's property. I mean,
Or if just a low spot.
and you're right. We're going to take notes.
Well, you're talking about scope, maybe for what work you would do. And I guess the initial scope is: are there any big liability issues out there that you see that could be a huge expense to the village? That's key. And then secondary to that, if you're already out there and going down the trail, well, there's a drainage issue here, there's a, whatever here. So these are things that you might want to be concerned about because somebody's going to come ask.
Exactly. Thank you. That's kind of the separation of buckets, if you will.
yeah, you have to have two hats when you're going. If it gets to that point, whoever does it,
Right.
has got to have a little bit of knowledge both ways.
It's
So
like put the standard down.
Yeah.
Landowner.
don't send a landscape architect out there to do it if you have to. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for the time.
And I think, again, for the board, not that there's any judgment on Peoria County or Farmington, whether they decide they're not interested in being involved in the ongoing sharing of liability and or sharing of basic maintenance costs. If that's not in the cards for them, if that's their groups don't want to do that, then the question for this board is, are we willing to take that on,
Additional cost.
independently as Hannah City? Or if they are in, then that might change your calculus as well. But what other questions, comments? Anybody? It's a spaghetti bowl of stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, no.
I think we gave them enough to think about for a while. So
I know I have some homework, so.
I will talk to you, Janicki, about the extension. I've got a little information on that, so I'll give you a call tomorrow and talk to you about starting on the extension with the STB.
Yeah, and let me summarize. I've got 3 action items that I'll put in our note for tomorrow, and if I've missed anything, let me know. But I think what I heard was, 1, we're going to pursue the extension, right? We want to do that and find out what they say. 2, we've already done the work on the UP contract, so that cost we've already spent, so we might as well send it back to them and see how they respond to it, right? And 3, Peoria County, we're going to give Peoria County and Farmington some information so that they can start having some discussions and getting a feel for what kind of appetite there is in their areas for sharing in the liability and sharing in that basic maintenance cost moving forward. Have I covered everything? Key action item?
I think so that I heard, and I would add that I think I should be able to, along with the indemnification language that I'm going to send to Ken and to Ms. Williams, I should be able to put in at least some sort of bullet points, if you will, of what we'd be looking for in the intergovernmental agreement to give them a little bit more, something a little more concrete to talk about internally, to take to their attorneys.
Yeah, at this point, I think our struggle would be, and you guys push back on me if you disagree, but I don't know that we can give them an estimated cost of what that basic maintenance is going to look like. We just know that it's going to be there. And we can't give a cost of what the liability might look like, but we can give language as to what we would be asking them to take on. Am I saying that correctly?
I think that's right. And it won't be hyper technical language. This is sort of concept. I guess the one assurance they have is that Hannah City will be on the hook too. So It's not, we're not trying to palm off liability or responsibility on anybody else, just to share in pro rata and in equal parts, so.
Okay.
All right, sounds
Well, I
good.
would say thank you all very much for letting me share your time, and good luck to everybody, and I hope you all get home tonight just fine.
Hey, before we close out of this, Jonathan, I just want to say that I'm very grateful personally and on behalf of the board for the work that you've been doing for us. I know we're paying you, but at the end of the day, I don't know where we would be without you. So thank you.
It's a real interesting project, and boy, I hope we can get it together, because it sure would be nice to have the trail there. So, thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
So Fred, as somebody who has been working on this for so long, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, let me just say, I've been working on this for so long. People know that I've been working on this for so long. Every week I get people coming up asking me, what's the status? When are we going to get this trail? I don't know if you guys have had people ask you, but it's important to our community. There are a lot of people who are anxious for this trail. They don't realize all of the little details that go into it, and the liability issues and that. There are liability issues. There's no question about that. As I look at other trails that have been built, they've been able to overcome them and have some great trails. Every trail that I've talked to, the people who worked on them and getting them up, they say, yeah, it's tough getting them going, but once they get going, people love them, and it really helps your community. It brings economic development to your community. It brings housing to your community, because younger people, young families love these trails. They love to build near these trails. So it's a real positive for the communities that have the trails in their area. That's why I've been working so hard on this for so long. It's been a real struggle. I mean, it's been up and down and up and down. Every time I think we're at the finish line, something else comes in and I get another load dumped on me.
Is this the first time we've had grant money associated with it?
No, actually not. Actually, we had this back in 2015. We had received the same RTP grant, and we were moving forward at that time. Unfortunately, at that time, the state of Illinois did not have a budget, and they couldn't process the grants. They couldn't spend the grant money. And because of the economic impact of the state not having a budget for over a year and a half, that grant money went back. And so we started over, and that's kind of how Hannah City became the lead agency, is because in 2018, we'd gotten another extension from the STB. And so we decided to give it one more shot. And I had been working on it for so long, and I was the one who kind of took up the banner and said, let's try one more time. And that's kind of how Hannah City became the lead agency, and more of the responsibility then turned to Hannah City at that time. So that's kind of how we got here.
How restrictive is the grant money for the type of purchase it is?
As far as,
Well, if they don't get this done and they say they're going to vacate the line and then simply sell it, be simple, just give title to the property away, why wouldn't we just tell them, forget rail banking it then? Why do you even want to rail bank it? Just sell it to us fee simple. Let us buy the property, and then we'll sell what we don't want of it, and we'll keep what you need for a trail. Because going west of Farmington, that dead ends to nothing out there. I don't think once you get to Farmington, somewhere in Farmington, really that's all you need.
Well, you wouldn't even have to, if it's not rail bank, we could buy from Taylor Road to Pekin Lane and be done.
Yeah, or you could just buy the pork. You could take it into Peoria, connect where it needs to. You could take it in there, and you could sell the tips off. Well, they'll make you buy. They won't leave behind little chunks. From what I've seen of it, usually when they vacate it, what will happen? One I saw basically this went across eastern Illinois, so there's no trees, there's nothing. It was 30 miles of uninterrupted farm ground. I mean, nothing. And the farmers all went together.
Farmers would buy it.
Yeah.
The problem with
This is different here. This goes through some multi-use. That literally was nothing. It was Champaign area.
the problem with this line, and the problem that the UP has had, and in our conversations with the UP at the very beginning of all of this, was it's been sitting empty for them for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
They've removed the tracks, they've removed the rails. It's been sitting empty.
Yeah.
They don't care. This is a very minor 25 miles of hundreds of miles of railroad track for the UP.
It's service coal that doesn't exist anymore. It'll never have a use for them ever again.
Right. They kept this line open basically because there was a rumor years ago that a dump was going to be built in Fairview, and so they
BFI owned the property. I mean, they just sold it a few years ago.
They kept that open because they thought they could make money by running trains on there, getting garbage from Chicago and dumping it in that property in Fairview. When BFI sold that property and it became not feasible, they said, all right, we'll just abandon it then.
Mm-hmm.
For the UP, this 25 miles is nothing to them.
But why couldn't they? I mean, could we use the money to simply tell them, forget rail banking, and then just vacate it and let us buy it from you then? Then we'll actually own it. You can get rid of the stuff you don't need then or not interested in ever developing.
Right.
And recover some costs.
At the time that this project first got started, they were not interested in that.
Yeah, exactly.
They said basically, if you don't buy it, no big deal. We'll just keep it the way it is.
Yeah. But what about now? Since they basically said, if this doesn't go through, we're going to vacate the line completely, which means they can transfer straight ownership of it.
Well, the grant money is dependent. The grant money is dependent on. I think your original question was how restrictive it is, and I think the grant money is dependent on it being rail banked and all the way through.
Yes, it's the grant money is dependent on turning it into a trail.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way this grant.
And it would still turn into a trail.
Yeah, but
they want the whole route completely 100%, even if it dead ends and
it dead ends in past Middle Grove there.
Yeah.
The old Tipple, the old Midland Coal Company Tipple is where it dead ends.
Yeah.
This used to be the Minneapolis something. I've got the history of this.
Today too.
Used to be the Farmington to Peoria Railroad was the very first thing, I think.
Well, no, actually, it was before that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The history of this is quite interesting. I got a book that somebody just sent me this past week, and I haven't read it, but it's the history of that railroad, and so that might help us. I'll look through there to see if there were any spills that were documented back then.
The last car on it, all the oil.
But yeah, that's kind of how it is. The grant money is restricted because it's a rails to trails project.
Yeah. And it would still be a rails to trails, but they're retired. They want you to take because it'd be a lot better just to buy it simply and just keep what you wanted to make a trail out of and get rid of the rest.
But to your point, there's still if that's what they want to do, we wouldn't have the grant money. But then the question would be, if we only wanted peeking through Taylor Road, what would that cost us? And they would have to come up with the full amount or get a different grant.
Right.
Yeah.
Or we just get a loan for ourselves.
Yeah, depending on what it would cost. I mean, how many miles is that?
It's showers. But the grant's a lot better because you don't have to pay that back.
Yeah.
If it's a loan, it's never going to happen. The grant, it can happen. But yeah, that's what I was going to say. I figured the grant was probably so restrictive that it's almost
it's very
adversarial at this point, because if it was less restrictive, you could probably just deal with the railroad and say, hey, vacate it. Let us buy it. We'll sell off what we don't want of it. You get all your money for it with one purchaser, which is what they want. Yeah. And then we can go forward with it. But
and this grant is specific as far as not being able to sell it. We've got to buy the whole thing, and we can't parcel it off after that.
Yeah.
We have to keep the whole corridor as a rail corridor.
Which hurts the cause. Their whole cause is to get the trail built, but then they made it so restrictive that you can't.
Right.
there's no wiggle room to do something to actually get it going, because that would help the cause a lot of it if you could,
And there are places that have done that down in Madison County, down north of St. Louis area there. They've actually done that. Where they bought railroads that have been abandoned, just short 2 or 3 mile stretches.
just simply bought it, just purchased the title to it. It's just theirs. Yeah.
Right. And purchased it outright and turned it into trails and connected it with other trails. And they've got a beautiful system. I don't know if you've ridden those trails down there, but they are excellent trails down there.
Well, yeah. I mean, if it was 3 miles of trail, Hannah Secret probably feasibly just buy it around town. You know what I mean? And just buy it and work on it. It would be,
Well, we know, Fred, you'll go ahead with getting with Johnny and trying to get the extension. And we do appreciate all your hard work and time and effort that you put into this. I know I appreciated when you were on the board as mayor, and everything you've done. So I greatly appreciate you still continuing to do it.
So one more thing. So the intergovernmental agreement, it's got to probably say too that if it's dependent on us making it into a trail, does there have to be language in there saying that once the intergovernmental agreement is formed, that group will continue to seek funding to build the trail? Because otherwise, I could see also holding this property indefinitely, nothing ever getting developed just because of the cost to even develop a small portion of it.
Yeah, I think you guys know this. If not, I'll let you know that we have already established a 501c3, and there are people who are willing to donate to this. We have not advertised it. We've not sought donations, although
Heavy hitters or people willing to donate $100.
Some
Be generic. Don't give specifics.
some corporations are also interested.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was wondering. Is there grant funding? Because what it needs then, the next step it needs another couple $1 million infusion.
There are some other grants. There are some other grants.
Yeah.
And there are other state grants that will help with this. And what our initial plan was, the funding for the maintenance and the design would come from outside our governmental entities, and the 501c3 would raise money to basically
there's other programs to infuse because it needs a huge shot of cash immediately. We're not immediately, but at some point to get going, it will.
Right. The biggest cost I see right after the initial purchase is signage. We would have to put up signs. There would have to be portions of the trail that we'd have to say are off limits. Any place where there are structures, we'd have to close those structures and put up signage to limit our liability.
Barrier, road crossings, barrier before the bridges.
Sure, things like that. Those are the initial costs. And then as we wait for funding to come in and donations to come in, grants to be filed for it and received. So you're still looking at, even after we purchase it, you're still looking at quite a bit of time before we would even be able to do anything to make it into a trail.
I would guess once you get to that point, is it easier to get the grants to build because you have a lot smaller pool of people going for that because you've made it past that first step and weeded out all the,
Right, yeah. And I mean, there are still other people looking for those grants, but.
And my whole point is, I don't want to struggle to get through this, get the thing bought, only to get to a point where you're definitely just holding 30 miles of trail for 30 years and you can never get to that next step of actually making it happen,
We'll be riding our bikes in the mud.
Okay, I think it'll go.
Okay.
I'll let you
Thank
go.
you very much.
It's not too bad. Yeah.
So I know Cassandra's got to get home. She's all the way in Germantown. So before you, you should have a copy of the previous
Thanks, Fred.
meeting minutes from our January 18th, 2022 meeting.
I will just say something.
I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Johnson, second by Weaver. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same. Motion carries. Treasury report.
So there are two warrant list this week at this meeting, just because I printed a one for all of the bills, and then we got an extra invoice this morning from Illinois American Water, and I want to make sure that got approved too. So if you could just look over both of them, I'd appreciate it.
And I have to say that I definitely like the new layout that tells you what the bills are for.
I thought it was neater and easier to read, so I'm glad you like it. I like it too. So
That's all Cassandra.
Yeah, I do like it.
actually, it was all locus. It was all in there. You just had to pick one.
Yeah, but you found it.
Take credit for it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You wrote a little programming language, modified locus on your own.
It was me. It was all me.
Now that's proprietary to Hannah City, so we'll expect our paycheck.
Make a motion for treasury report, pay outstanding bills.
Motion by Johnson, second by Sidak. Any further discussion? Roll call it. Johnson?
Yes.
Sidak?
Yes.
Pearson?
Yes.
Weaver?
Yes.
Motion carries. And if he hasn't spoken enough already, the engineer's report.
No, I appreciate it. I came out tonight just knowing that this conversation was going to happen, so appreciate you accommodating me and having the opportunity to speak. I don't have anything else other than we're hope to have the MFT next program, or excuse me,
Second meeting in February.
second meeting, as we had mentioned. And I just wanted to make a quick comment on all this. Is obviously there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of decisions to be made. I look forward to participating as you see fit to make sure we're not in the hold up. You can get the answers and information you need to be able to make decisions. There's going to be a lot. So I appreciate the opportunity. So I didn't have anything else, and if so, I was going to head out too before we get between 2 and 96 inches of snow. No one's really sure.
Also, just to let you know, if we do get to the point where we're going to do the study, I do know a couple people with some UTVs.
Okay.
Where we could possibly get a ride in those.
That's what we had originally kind of roughed out scoped this as 20. We do these for parcels all the time. We don't do them for 26 miles or 24 and a half miles of linear area. So yeah, we had in there to utilize ATVs where it's accessible. I don't even know if portions down there, are they accessible even?
There are portions you go so far and
I
then
don't know. ATVs go through all the time, so there's got to be some kind of trail
You
back
can start
there.
at Creek Road and make it. There's one structure down there, isn't there? One bridge
yeah,
at the
there's
bottom.
one trestle.
But
But
yeah,
there's a lot of-
you might have to go Creek Road up to that point, backtrack, then come the other way up to that bridge, and then
That's
backtrack.
exactly
But a lot of it's drivable. A lot of it's drivable.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So but yeah, thank you. We did kind of have that in there, trying to determine how much is too much and then what time period do we have to do it in.
Yeah, and I wouldn't mind going out with you and
Okay.
doing that. And
Okay.
I would
Yeah, it'll be some of our other folks that are doing that, but I'm learning and I've recognized that I think we need to speak to some people too, and I've heard of several people here. A lot of times you talk with the guy who's owned it for 40 years or the guy who used to maintain it. Well, those people may not exist, but there still is some information out there. And I did find today, I was teasing, I've heard of railroad enthusiasts, never heard of abandoned railroad enthusiasts, but
Did you
they're
have
out
the
there.
website?
Yep, they're out there. It actually was great information, all kinds
Yeah,
of
if it's the
pictures.
one I'm thinking, because I think the last, is it the one with the last car on it was the oil car going to
There was a
farm?
whole lot there, but pictures and I thought if somebody needs to know what does it look like in the next week and we can't get out there, something better than nothing.
And there's 30 comments from those people where they, it's.
I was surprised.
Yeah, I'm working on the one in Morton that's also on there. When I was looking on it the other day, I was like, well, this E-line's on there too. And I was reading about it. It's,
They actually have a
50
fancy
comments.
name. Railroad enthusiasts or train enthusiasts. I don't know what it is, but there's like a fancy.
Abandoned railroad enthusiasts.
yeah, this was like a abandoned railroad enthusiast.
really?
There's
Yeah.
30 fan comments afterwards of people commenting on the status of it. It's, a very weird subset of the railroad culture is these abandoned lines.
well, thank you very much, Brandon.
I appreciate
Get home,
it.
be safe.
Thank you. We will see you in a couple weeks and talk before, I'm sure.
Okay. Michael, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have much to report on. Tax exemption certificates were filed, I think, last week. Either way, they were filed by the deadline. I know there's a potential subdivision issue going on here, and whether or not we need a public hearing on that. I think Bill's more in the loop on that. I don't have very many details, but I know he's been working with Brian on that. So I'm happy to weigh in on any of that if you have questions. But other than that, I don't have too much to report on.
Okay. Do you see any more that Michael would need to stay for? Michael, I'm going to say the same thing to you. If there's nothing else you need to stay for,
I'm fine with staying, but if
you're more than fine to stay.
Your call.
Okay.
Based upon how comfortable you are driving.
Yeah, that's your call. So,
I've driven it worse.
Prove it.
My car hasn't.
Yeah.
okay. Administrators report, Brian.
Okay, I'm just going to go through the financials. So what you have in there is this deck right here. It's got 2 slides per page. These are the December financials. So if you look on page 1, slide 2, center column going down, income for the month of December was $81,496. Expenses was $69,853. So we had a positive variance of $11,643. Before you get too excited, there's a process which we missed because of the transition, but there's BDD money that when the sales tax money comes in, the BDD money goes into the general account. That income needs to be transferred to BDD, and it's around $11,000. So we haven't transferred it in the month of January. So it's basically a break-even month, I guess, is the point I'm making. If you move on, then if you look at the P&L statement for the core funds in December, so you can see income and expense for each of the accounts, pretty much positive in all categories or close to break-even, with, again, the exception of water. 2 things on that. The 2.7% increase for the water goes in on the next bill starting, so the last bill of January, the January bill going out here in February. And then we're going to have some discussion later about the analysis that we got on the water and sewer rate analysis, and we'll talk about that later. MFT for the month, there's $9,900 worth of expenses there. That was sidewalks, final sidewalk bill. That should complete all the MFT expenses for this program year. So you will see in the year-to-date numbers what that looks like. TIF for the month, we had $1,000. We're positive, no expenses. Again, BDD, we're only showing $2 of income, so that's where that $11,000 would go with no expenses. So that number would get higher where the general number gets lower. If you look at the core funds, December year-to-date core funds. So follow the center column down. Year-to-date, this is our 8th month, so not quite 3 quarters. We got $931,817 worth of income, $200 worth of expenses. So we're positive $281,617. Again, I give you a caution. The ARPA money that came in, that $81,000, it is in the income, but it's not in the expense. We did spend that money in January, so there'll be roughly $70,000 coming out in the January numbers for the lift station project that we're working on and for the meters that we bought. Yeah. So take that down $70,000 and you'd be pretty close to where we are. Still $212,000 to the good. Year to date, then you can look at each of the accounts. The only one I would point out is the water, because that's got the $81,000 worth of income in it, so it's actually it's negative. If you look at the year-to-date MFT, so this worked out almost exactly the way we thought. About 50% of the cost is coming from the income, that $46,566 that we brought in, and then we had Rebuild Illinois and MFT money in an account of savings. That's where that $40,967 is coming from. So for the calendar year, we're showing a loss on the MFT program, but we pulled money from our reserves to pay that balance. Okay. December year-to-date TIF, we've got $8,382,000 worth of income, currently $4,125 expenses. The problem here is, not the problem, but the reality here is that when at the last meeting we talked about the fact that we have to give back 80% of the residential TIF dollars. That was roughly $5,000. So with the January income that's going to come in, TIF's probably, when we show the numbers next month, going to be about break even, I would guess. December year-to-date BDD, that would be follow the center column down, $73,000 with the $2,000 of expenses. 2 points here. This is where we're going to pull half the money for the parking lot lease project that we ran with the coffee can. So those dollars will be coming out. We've paid for all of it, and I think that's going to happen in January. That'll come out in January, and then we're going to get half of that back from the coffee can. And then you got $11,000 that's going in there in income that isn't showing up yet that we haven't carried over. Cash summary year to date or year over year. So 2021 through December, we're $321,088 more cash than we had then. Of liquid cash, there's $174,000. Of designated cash, there's $147,000. But again, you got to back out that $81,000. that's still sitting there in the designated side, so that number's a little bit lower. But bottom line is we're still $200 plus to the good on the cash side, so we're having a good year. So December summary, core funds showing 11,000 positive, but closer to break even. BDD income not transferred. Water was negative, but we're going to have a rate discussion to talk about where we're at there. And we've got the 2.7% increase coming. MFT was the sidewalk, but the program should be done. BDD, we got the 11K that's not coming in. Year to date, our core funds are positive 282, but that's closer to 212 when you take out the ARP expenses. Water is negative about $18,000 year to date. MFT is correct. I talked about the 50-50 split. TIF's going to be close to break even once we get the reimbursement done for the other taxing bodies. BDD is currently light by 11K minus the parking lot. And then our cash year to date, we're showing 321, but if you take the ARPA out, we're 240 positive year over year through 8 months of improved cash flow. That's it.
Okay.
Would you say all of that again?
You can watch a recording. So that brings us to finance.
Nothing to report.
Attaboy.
Sanitary sewer.
Nothing to report.
Water.
I do have something to report.
Time.
No refunds to report, but we have other fun stuff to talk about. I'll do the conference approval first, and then we can dive into that. So Jim would like to attend the technical conference February 15th through 17th. The Rural Water Conference. It is with the conference and the hotel for 2 nights, $374.38. This is something I'm guessing he goes to on a regular basis.
He goes to every year.
Yeah, we normally
stay
on our water associations.
and we normally just approve, whatever the conference
He can
hotel
approve
costs are plus
compliments.
incidentals or
Yeah.
You're
what do
just,
they call it?
you're just telling us you approve this because it's under 500, right? We're not voting on this.
Well, it says vote on there, but yeah.
It's under 500. You approved it.
You can approve this, and then we pay out incidentals anyway. So.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeehaw, we're rolling.
Okay, we also got some rate analysis.
Did you want to do the ordinance first? You want to wait on that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, let's do that. So this is finally where we like it.
Yep. So, I don't know, Michael, if you want to speak to the language, basically the summary is we basically changed the language to say that if people put in a new meter, it has to go in a pit. It'll be at the property line. It'll be at their cost.
Yes.
But with our approval.
Yes.
And if we want anything other than the normal 1 permit per household, if we choose to put something else in, we can, but it's at our cost.
Yes.
Did we change anything on sewer?
I thought maybe just the bond. Were we?
We put in specific figures for the fees and the bond amounts.
A lot of it is just codifying current village
That's
practices.
exactly right. That's exactly right.
Couple minor new things.
The only thing we didn't do from the original discussion is Jim was offered the suggestion that maybe we have homeowners be responsible all the way to the main, and we ended up deciding not to do that because we didn't want them responsible for
Our roads.
our roads. That's right. Yeah.
All right, so make a motion to approve an ordinance amending provisions of Title V Public Works of the Village of Hannah City Code of Ordinances relating to meter installations and connection fees.
Second. Motion by Pearson. Second by Sidak. This will be ordinance number 22-02-01. Any further discussion? Roll call it. Sidak.
Yes.
Pearson.
Yes.
Weaver.
Yeah.
Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Rate analysis?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if you remember a long time ago, we talked about this RCAP group, Rural Community Action something.
Protocol.
Whatever. Great Lakes Community Action Partnership. It is a nonprofit that does free work for municipalities. And what they did is they came in and we met with them and they asked us for all kinds of data that Jim gathered up and provided. So how many users do you have, and what do your lines look like, and how much you billing, and how much you pumping, and what are you charging, and all that kind of stuff. And we did that for both water and sewer. And then it took them a long time, but then we had a meeting with them last week, and they gave us the data back on the rate analysis. So a comparison based upon that data of what we're charging, and based upon what they're seeing, what they think we should be charging. Okay. And I sent out a summary. You all haven't seen it, but basically here's what we learned. And I've rounded these numbers for simplicity. So on water, our rate for a minimum of 2,400 gallons is roughly $24. And they're saying in order to cover your basic costs, right, just the daily annual operation of your water system, that number's pretty close to right. I think they had it roughly 40 cents higher than that, but it was pretty close to being right. Our issue, and the reason we're losing money on water is when you look at our rate of loss at roughly 30%, they're saying that number, that 24, if you want to bill for that loss to cover for it, that $24 goes up $8 to $32 for 2,400 gallons. Now, obviously, the best solution is to find the leaks and fix them and go from there. And they are doing what they're saying is a leak analysis that we haven't got that data from them yet. And again, they look at all that data and they're telling us, and I find this, I'm skeptical, but I hope they're right. They tell us that they believe they can give us kind of general areas to look where they think the losses might be coming from. How we get to that point from based upon the data they've given, I don't know, but I was impressed with the data they gave us at the last meeting. So I'm not suggesting we go up $8 now, but if we wanted to cover our full basic costs, including the loss, we would need to be charging $32 rather than $24 for that minimum amount. They're doing the water loss analysis for us, so we need to wait on that and see what it looks like. And then when we put in these new meters, we might learn something from that as well. So all that might help us better understand if it is $8 or if we can figure out ways to cut into that and make it lower. They would also say we need to increase the amount to further cover capital costs. So they're saying just the basic operation, but you need a certain amount of money in there, so you're setting money aside for water in order to cover your capital. We are setting some money aside, but it's all for the tower, but it's not for any regular capital projects.
And it's for maintenance as far as like meters and things like that. We do that.
Yeah.
I don't think we've ever spent money out of it for meters.
We don't. We have it set aside in the budget.
Yeah, I'd have to look and see. I'd have to look and see what the actual numbers are. But we're part of the things that Cassandra and I are going to do when we build this year's budget, and we can work with the finance committee. But we're going to look at estimated actuals, and then we're going to evaluate how much money we're putting aside each month for each of the areas, and kind of start making some decisions as to are we putting enough aside or too much aside for, and rationalize that a little bit. And here's something that I thought was really interesting is he said, we currently discount for the greater volume usage. And he said that's 10 years ago practice. He said what most municipalities have learned is the larger users are putting more pressure on the system. So technically you should be charging them more the more that they use. That's at least the common philosophy now. But we're charging less as the usage goes up. Well, and I'm not suggesting that we should change that or flip that, but I do think we need to look at should we at least not decrease it moving forward. Anyway, long story short, what we decided to do is we've asked Tracy to do an analysis of how many of our current customers are in the below 2,400 usage, how many are in that second band of 2,400. I think it goes to like 5,000 gallons or something like that. But to tell us how many users are in each band, so that as we look at and evaluate if we're going to make some pricing adjustments in order to cover some of those costs, are we negatively impacting one group over another or so forth, so that we can share that information for you.
$30,000 in capital expenses we have earmarked in water.
Understand. I guess I was thinking about how much we actually moving to the water savings. It would be on the cash balance sheet.
Basically the tower fund, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's what we budgeted for capital.
Right. But I'm saying that's
so the tower fund was it 2,500 or
5,500?
Yeah.
2,500 a month.
Yeah.
I know the answer to this already.
Yeah.
Do they have any idea of timeline for the loss analysis?
Well, he told us 2 weeks, right? So,
Okay, come on.
yeah, based upon our experience, we're probably looking at 6 maybe or something. But again, like I said, they have taken a long time, but they're free. And so far, I've been impressed with the data. When we were asking him questions, and I was pulling out stuff and how much would it cost for this? I mean, he was just chugging through the data. And I got the spreadsheets if y'all want to look at it. It can be daunting when you look at it, all the different tabs. But I was impressed with his knowledge of our system. On sewer, our current rate for the minimum of 2,400 gallons is $20. And he said, again, comparing just the basic cost, in other words, what it costs to operate for a year, salaries all in, he said that number really should be closer to 15. But he said if you factor in the capital that you need to set aside for your sewer system, he kind of felt like the number was close to right. Maybe a little high, but he didn't feel like there was much need to change it. But he did say, and I think for sewer, we're not putting, if you take 500 times the total number of users or whatever, I mean, I came up with the dollar amount. We're certainly not putting $3,000 a month away for sewer. I think we're putting something away, but I don't remember. I'd have to look at that sheet again. So we may want to increase the amount that we're putting aside for sewer. But I wouldn't do that unless we're going to take some action on water to balance that out and make sure we're covering water. Because today sewer and sanitation's covering the water losses. So, any questions on that? No actions at this point. We're just looking at data and good data, I think, and we're trying to figure out how to take care of some of the losses. And then eventually we need to come back and have a conversation on do we want to take any action.
And then the increase is happening this month, is it?
Correct. So it'd be the January bill. Yeah. So I think she's already put it in Locus, so it should be going out with the billing this week, actually.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nothing else to report.
Buildings and grounds,
Nothing.
streets and alleys.
Streets and alleys, looks like I had to get a new auger motor.
Yep.
Salt spreader. $683.11.
Correct.
Make a motion to approve that.
Second.
Motion by Weaver, second by Johnson. Any further? He beat you. Sorry. Or was just louder?
Louder.
Oh, no, I got them.
Any further discussion? Roll call it. Pearson?
Yes.
Weaver?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Sidek? Yes. Motion carries.
That's all I had.
Police and planning?
From 116 to 129, there was 10 incident reports. Cold weather's having a positive impact on the safety of the community.
What was the second thing?
129, 10 incident reports.
We got that salt spreader just in time.
Yeah, that's right.
End of report.
Okay. Economic development?
Nothing big right now, but last night I attended the park board meeting and talked to some of them concerning some economic development stuff. So hopefully next meeting I can have a more formal report. They've got some projects that every time they mention they winked at me. So maybe we're not going to do in terms of economic development if we got any cash burning a hole in our pockets.
Nope, sure don't.
Thanks for going to that meeting.
Yes, thank you very much. Everybody should have in front of them resolution extending temporary executive powers pursuant to 65 ILCS 5-11-1-6.
So move.
By Johnson.
I think he wants to get that. Second.
I don't think he's completed his thought yet.
You haven't? Oh, I thought you were at the end of it.
Motion by Johnson.
Second.
Second by Sidek. Any further discussion?
And what was that resolution number?
2022-02-01.
Okay.
So any further discussion? Roll call it.
Weaver.
Yes.
Beaver? Yes. Johnson? Sidak?
Yes.
Pearson?
Yes.
Motion carries. Um, and pursuant to the authority vested in the office of the village president by the Illinois Municipal Code 5-11-1-6, the Illinois Emergency Management Agency Act, Section 3305/11, and Ordinance 2020 Gotta fix that. Ordinances are only two numbers.
Ordinance back in 2020.
No, they're still 20 though. They're only two numbers.
Right,
The
but
ordinance.
I feel like that's the ordinance number that was used
Oh,
back then.
okay.
So it's accurately reporting it wrong.
It's the wrong number based on what we usually do with ordinances, but that might be the actual ordinance.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Yeah.
We're accurately reporting what we did wrong.
Yeah, because we had a few of them like that.
So, Ordinance 2020-04-01 for the Village of Hannah City. I, Anthony Frixell, the Village President of the Village of Hannah City, do hereby declare a local state of emergency exists as of the date of February 1st, 2022, and shall continue until such time as provided in Ordinance 2020-04-01. Did have some correspondence. Family of Cindy Elliott sent us a thank you for what we did for her mom and for some of the snow removal we helped them with. Just there on Main. Also, I dropped off a copy to everybody from Royal Publishing. This is for the 2022 Farmington Girls Basketball Regional Official Souvenir Program, which Farmington High School will be hosting. They wanted to know if we wanted to do anything. Put an ad in there saying, from the Village of Hannah City.
On that note, I would suggest yes, because we always look like we don't care.
We always put ads in.
Do we?
Yeah,
Yes,
I've
always.
never
We put ads in.
So I think it's people just don't pay attention that we care.
Yeah.
Well, we need to specify. Please put ours in.
So
I don't know if we've ever turned down an ad, to be honest with you.
Really?
So we can do a.
Why do people say that we don't care?
No.
Oh,
I just am like, I've never seen one.
I see it in the
They say that-
local one.
I just hear the police and planning guy doesn't care. That's all I hear.
that's not true. I'm telling the community.
I've seen it.
That's not what I heard.
So we could do 350 with your approval, or we'd have to vote on it at the next meeting.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts?
I didn't get a sheet.
Would we just be buying up a page that says "Good job from the Village of Hannah City"?
Probably like good luck.
It'd be like good luck in tournament. It just puts us on there as a sponsor, basically.
I mean, I think for ease, the half page of 350 would be ideal.
So let it be written.
Okay. I'll take care of it, and I'll get a hold of them. I'll get with Cassandra and let them know. So, if everybody agrees.
Can I put something like fear of the fourth? Go, farmer.
We only care a half page of it.
It won't matter. She won't see it anyway.
I've never seen one, dude. I guess maybe I don't work hard enough.
The village will accept your
I'm sorry.
apology.
I'm sorry, Caleb, that I've never seen one. I guess I can just see the
The memory cleared a little bit,
insurances and maybe I just don't pay attention to them.
Citizens of Hannah City forgive you. I speak on their behalf.
I'm gonna have to
As a fill in the
scour.
committee.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then I just got a Second Chance Cardiac Solutions email. Want to know if we want to buy some AEDs.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because I really think we should have one here, and
Yeah.
we should actually have one down in the maintenance building too. They almost need to have one on the truck, because if they're out digging or something,
Yeah. Where my dad used to work at Santon District, they'd had one in the shop and one in the office. They didn't carry them on their truck.
What's an AED?
Automatic.
External defibrillator. Yeah, I think he got trained on that like 20 years ago when they came out. So.
They're pretty easy. I mean, when you do your.
Oh, they're all hat now. Yeah, he said it was easy. They tell you what to do. It literally talks to you and tells you, stick it, shows you what. I mean, it's.
Yeah, the pad shows you where to stick them on the body.
So,
and normally, if you put them in a building, then they're in a case with an alarm on them. So
Yeah, we're all.
if somebody opens it, the alarm goes off.
You don't have anything to do.
You don't know how many people steal those. Seriously, that's what they did at Caterpillar. Because the guys on lines were stealing them.
So does
The
that,
80s. Really?
is that AED thing, is that something
No.
we will vote on or what?
No, we're,
Not doing?
no, just correspondence. Just right now. Anything else need to come before the board this evening?
I'd like to put in the minutes that today is Clerk Sidek's birthday.
35 years old. What are you, 12?
Happy 35th.
right there.
Hmm?
Happy 35th.
Yeah, it's 39 forever. That's what it's saying.
I like the 13th time you celebrate your 40th birthday, right?
He's 22.
Oh, never mind.
Yep, so you can't guess it by that.
That's easy to find for record.
Thank you.
Did everybody get their statement of economic interests?
Oh.
Nope.
Did you not get an email to you?
So,
Oh,
when would it come out?
it's on your,
He doesn't respond either.
what's that one he's got?
PP.
PP trustee.
TR.
The worst name ever for an email, but.
I can change it.
Oddly, very
But,
descriptive.
I got it in the other room.
I mean,
I'm
what
not
day
sure
did you
what
send it?
Rod had it. The Peoria County sent it. It's
Yeah,
coming
yeah.
from the Peoria County Clerk's office.
I don't think they have my email because I did not get that for sure.
Well, when we
I-
talked about it, they hadn't sent me the email yet.
either.
I looked for it and did. And I know at the,
Well,
board,
did
at the
you-
park board meeting
I
last
don't
night,
think
they were
I
talking
got
that it's supposed to come out later in February.
No, so no one has it.
And also, there's a big hefty fine if you don't.
I just went
Yeah,
to the
they
site.
said
I
that.
just went to the site and.
Oh, I just assumed that because you said you got the email, right? And you sent it to him?
Maybe.
No.
Mm-hmm.
I got his email that I sent to, and I forwarded it to you, and you said you already had it or something.
What email was that?
No, that was me.
That was you.
Tony.
That was
And
me.
then I got Tony's receipt, so I assumed they already sent them out.
That was his, but
Yeah, because I just went to the site. I have a bookmark on my computer at home.
So they haven't sent the email yet. You just went to the site and did it.
Yeah, because I saw the email that was going around about it. I was like, well, I'll just go out there and fill it out.
Okay.
Because you said you couldn't find me.
I said you didn't, your email, that wouldn't let me change the email.
Hey, I have a question. Can we adjourn and have this conversation after?
Yeah.
This is boards. Okay. Anything else come before the board?
No.
I just want to stop
Meeting
recording.